Hi guys, it's Reba. Welcome or welcome back. August is Women in Translation Month for the books and reading world, and in honor of the month, I wanted to make a video with some book recommendations. I know we're nearing the end of August, but I read Women in Translation all year round, and I think you should too. I have a big stack to go through today, but I'm going to break it up by first talking about three writers, women writers in translation that I adore and I think should get more recognition. And then I'm going to go through some books that I've read recently in the past few months that have been in translation that I really loved. And then finally, I just bought one new book, and it happens to be a book by a woman in translation. So I'm going to also talk about that. The first writer I want to talk about is Tove Jansson. She is someone I look up to so much. I am so inspired by this woman. She's an academy-trained artist, the creator of the Moomins, anti-fascist, lesbian icon, and the writer of some of my most favorite books. Jansson was Finnish but spoke Swedish, so all of her books have been translated from the Swedish. Like I said, she was classically trained. She started her career as a fine art painter, but supported herself by illustrating and creating the Moomins comics, and the Moomins are what made her famous. I don't think it was until her 50s that she started to write adult novels. And oh, we're so lucky. We're so lucky to have all of her art in the world, especially her writing. I own and have read 4 of her books so far, but I think she has several more novels, a few more short story collections. So I am looking forward to reading more from her. In all of her fiction, I've found that she writes really wonderful characters. She renders them all with a lot of humor and wit, but she's also very understanding towards her characters without being too sentimental. She's also really good at capturing the beauty and the harshness of the natural world. Landscapes and weather are all elements of her writing and the world she creates. I think in both her Moomins world and the writing she's done for adults, she's able to capture both like whimsy and lightness that cuts through the darkness and the realities that her characters have to face. I would suggest you start with the summer book if you have not read Jansson yet. This is one of my favorite books, and I think it is a quintessential Tove Jansson novel. It has like all of the elements I've just described. Really rich, good, interesting characters, wonderful writing about the environment they're in. It's also a perfect late summer read if you're still in your summer reading season. This is about a 6-year-old named Sophia and her grandmother as they spend the summer on their little island off the coast of Finland. I know that Jansson wrote this shortly after her mother passed away, and her mother is someone she was really, really close with. And so knowing that, reading this book, I think becomes even more heartbreaking and warming at the same time. In the book, the character Sophia has just lost her own mother. So as they go about their summer, Sophia and her grandmother are navigating grief and having discussions around the questions about life and death as only two people on very opposite ends of the spectrum of age can. This is just a really quiet, beautiful little novel. I definitely recommend it. Yeah. And of course, Jansson is so good at writing about islands because she spent basically her entire life every summer being on an island in the Gulf of Finland. So I think her family had an island in her childhood, and then in adulthood, she and her partner bought a little island and built a little house on it. I think this is her, swimming in the sea in front of that island on the cover of this collection. If you want to get to know Jansson a little bit more and you enjoy nature writing, I would suggest reading Notes from an Island. This is a collection, kind of little memoir style vignettes spanning about over 20, I think it's like 26 summers she and her partner Tuliki spent on their little island. This is also a nice, quick little late summer read if you're looking for that. The other two books I have in my collection of hers are The Woman Who Borrowed Memories, really great short stories. I actually think she's excellent at writing short stories, and even her novels are not even that long. I think she's good at writing compact stories. The other novel I have of hers is The True Deceiver. This is great. This is a good winter read, but it's about two women who have very different perspectives on life and how they clash with each other. It's really great. That's Tove Jansson. The next writer I want to talk about is Olga Ravn. Olga Ravn is a Danish novelist and poet, and I think I've kept up and have read all the books that have been translated into English so far. I think there's just these three. But she's wonderful. I love Olga Ravn. I think more people need to read her. She somehow writes so precisely about the pain and beauty of humanness, but in really abstract ways, and also sometimes through characters and narrators who are not necessarily human. Every book that I've read of hers is wildly different. They're all their own unique little weirdos, and I've adored them all. I keep saying I will read any subject she wants to write about in any way she wants to write about it. I think she's just brilliant. My first encounter with Olga Ravn was The Employees, and I also think this is a great place to start. This is a literary sci-fi novel. This is about the absurdity of productivity work culture, and also about the delightfully mundane little things that make up a life. The structure of the novel is abstract and experimental. It's told through a series of statements made by human and humanoid crew members of this interstellar spaceship, but all of the statements are scrambled and out of order. I found it funny and existential and very touching. The next book I read by her was My Work, and this book is also experimental in form. It is about a young mother dealing with her anxieties and depression as she navigates this new chapter of life. It is told through a combination of fiction and memoir and essays and poetry, and I don't know, that really worked for me. The combination of all of those things was a really great collage to create a portrait of a person, and I found it deeply relatable as a human and as a woman and as a creative. I think the most recent translated work from her is The Wax Child. The Wax Child is about a 17th century Danish noblewoman who was accused of witchcraft. It's inspired by the actual witchcraft trials of Denmark, and Ravn did a ton of extensive research in the archives to write this book, and you can tell. The book explores corruption through power and the church, as well as magic and female friendships. And it's narrated by an inanimate wax doll. It's weird, eerie, witchy. It's a great spooky season fall read, I would say. And I had the pleasure of going to an author talk with Olga Ravn at the Center for Fiction earlier this spring, and the discussion was about this book and the writing of it. It was excellent, and hearing her speak endeared me even more to her. I could tell that she's so in touch with nature and with the past, and also with the occult in a way that I find really intriguing and wonderful. Because this story is told through an object, she talked a lot about objects in her author talk, and she invited us as an audience to interact with objects differently. She recommended using all your senses to interact with objects without doing much thinking. She told us to touch and hold things and listen. And I loved that advice, to listen for what objects have to tell you. Like this idea that they keep memories in a different way than we do. I don't know. I really liked that. Again, this book was heavily researched, and I think she was inspired to write it after working on a different project in which she was going through the archive, the folk archive, to study these different documents related to the witchcraft trials in Denmark. She'd been working on a memorial project for those who had been burned. And she also told this incredible story of when she was working on that project, she spent several days, she just every day would go to this clearing where the burnings had happened. And she said she just stood there and listened for, I don't know, a long period of time every day. She said that when she did this, she felt like she could hear through time, and she described the time she was hearing through like nodes on a spinal cord. Oh, I loved hearing her talk about these experiences. I really did. And then the final thing I want to bring up from that author talk was that she had talked about the fact that going through the archive, she was able to read these spells and recipes from that time period. And she ended up collecting a lot of these recipes and spells, and then started a tradition where every year she gathers her friends together and they reenact some of these rituals and dances and spells. She calls it playing at magic. She said that every year they get a little bit more intense, but that there's this new level of connection she's found when she plays at magic with her friends, and they have pig's blood splattered on their arms and faces and kind of look at each other differently. One summer they played a game in the forest where they like lit torches and were like running around in the forest. And she swore that she saw faces illuminated by the torchlight in the like darkness of the forest that like were not the people she was with. It's almost like she was like, the people of the past joined us when we did this ritual. And if that doesn't make you want to read her books, she's probably not for you, but she's definitely for me. I need more Olga Ravn in my life. I cannot wait to see what she comes up with next. And I hope all her stuff gets translated. I think there's still a few other books. Maybe her poetry hasn't been translated to English yet. The third writer I want to talk about is Yoko Ogawa. This is a Japanese writer. All the work's been translated from Japanese. And I've only read 2 of her books, but I would love to read more. In fact, I think I'm gonna try to read her collection, Revenge, in the fall for spooky season. I've loved both of the books I've read of hers so far. Both of them very different, but both about memory and loss in some ways. I think those are consistent themes in her work. I've found Ogawa to be very thoughtful and philosophical. Her books are fairly serious, but I feel like there's like an underlying oddness to her stories. Almost like her books are kind of like puzzles that the stories take place in. The first book I read was The Memory Police. I also think this is a great place to start. This is a book that I absolutely loved when I read it. This is another literary sci-fi, and it's about an island community that is under really extreme surveillance, and the objects on this island are slowly disappearing one by one, and the people are forgetting the objects and the names of the objects as they disappeared, as if these objects never existed at all. But there are still people on the island who remember these objects and the names of them, and because they remember, they are in danger of being taken away by the memory police. Again, very much about loss and memory, about preserving the past. It's a very strange and melancholy book, and I loved how it made me think. The second book I read by Ogawa I don't own, but it's called The Housekeeper and the Professor, and it is about a professor of mathematics who has short-term memory loss. His memory resets and erases every 80 minutes. And a housekeeper is hired to come help him with daily stuff and help care for him. Over the course of the novel, this housekeeper and her young son become dear friends to this older professor, and he helps them discover the elegance and wonder of numbers and math. It's very sweet and extremely moving. I really adored The Housekeeper and the Professor. Those are the 3 women writers in translation that I absolutely adore. I would love more people to read them, and I'm looking forward to reading more from each of them. Now I want to talk about some of the books I've read recently, so in the past several months, that have been written by women and have been in translation. First, let's talk about I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is translated from French, and this is a very popular novel. I've talked about it in previous videos. It's one of my favorites that I've read this year. I understand the hype. I get it. She deserves all the hype. This is a really, really wonderful book. I'm so glad I finally read this book. It's just the type of book that I like. It has a sci-fi survivalist setting and a philosophical, allegorical story. This is about a group of women who are left to find meaning in a world that they don't recognize, and the youngest among them is able to accept this absurdity of this life, and through determination and her love of learning and hunger for knowledge is able to help them. Fascinating, thought-provoking, and quite reverent in its questions about life and death. I found it really moving. I've also been getting to know Clarice Lispector, an icon as well. And this year I read The Passion According to G.H. Lispector's novels are translated from the Portuguese. Lispector is also very interesting and mystical and witchy in her own right. This book was probably the most difficult book that I've read of hers so far, for me personally. The Passion According to G.H. is about a woman who smashes a cockroach in a door, and as she watches it die, has an existential crisis. Her books are really dense and rich and heavily symbolic. I feel like my mind is blown with every book that I read of hers. I've come away with a deeper understanding of myself, and I think more, I feel like more deeply realized, and that I might understand the meaning of life more. I find her books really cerebral and esoteric, and again, this one's probably the one that was the most difficult for me to get through. And even though I felt like I understood most of it, I still am like, Lispector, you are on another plane. Like, you have reached another level of consciousness that I don't know if I'll ever get to. She's a genius. She's a little bit intimidating, but I don't think that should cause you to not try to read her. She's amazing. I highly recommend reading some Lispector. It's truly a gift that we have her work translated into English. The last 2 recent translated reads I want to talk about are a couple of the books I've read this summer. The first being Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. This was also translated from the Japanese. This novel is about women of different ages navigating what it means to be in their bodies and contemplating motherhood. There's a really close, intimate relationship with the narrator, Natsuko. I felt really connected to her. The first part of the book takes place over a weekend, and Natsuko's sister and her niece come to visit, and over the course of the weekend, tensions between the sister, Natsuko's sister, and her sister's daughter, tensions between them are brought to the surface in a surprising and moving way. And then the second part of the novel takes place over a longer period of time. Natsuko's a little bit older, and she's starting to have anxieties about whether or not she should have a child, and takes her on a journey of exploration of what that might look like, especially if she were to do it on her own. Most of the action of this book takes place in a very slice of life way, but there are moments that are more dreamy or surreal that kind of intensify the subconscious experience of the narrator, and I really liked that as well. Again, very intimate. I felt deeply connected to Natsuko and was really invested in finding out what she would decide to do by the end. And then I also recently read My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is the first book in the Neapolitan Quartet. Ferrante's works are translated from Italian. If you have not read the Neapolitan Quartet, I highly recommend it. There's a reason why many people say it's a masterpiece. I have read it before. This is my second time reading the first book. I really didn't appreciate this book as much. When I first read it, I didn't really appreciate it until I'd finished the entire quartet. If you're not familiar with the Neapolitan Quartet, it is a story of female friendship told through a bildungsroman. So we get to know the characters from childhood to later adulthood. It's narrated by one of the women, and she recounts the history of their friendship. It's a very interpersonal story, but the larger events that are happening on a national, political, and local level for these women also impact their friendship and the choices they make. This first book takes place during their childhood and early adolescence, and it is an excellent build-up and foundation setting for the following three books. I really, really loved returning to this series. It's deeply about the relationship between these women, but there is also so much heavy context about the world that they're inhabiting, class relations, the political environment they're in. This is post-war Italy. Their neighborhood, the setting of their neighborhood is really important to the story as well, almost a character in itself. Yeah, I think these books are excellent. I also desperately just need to read more Ferrante. There are several books outside of this series that I've been dying to read. So looking forward to reading more Ferrante in the future. Okay, and now my recent book purchase. Let's talk about that. I was just in Italy, and while I was there, I bought myself a souvenir, which was a book, and that book was The Little Virtues by Natalia Ginzburg. I've heard really great things about Natalia Ginzburg. Never read her before. I'm familiar with this title, The Little Virtues, but again, I really don't know much. I just know she's important, and a lot of writers that I respect speak really highly of Ginzburg. I think this book is just a collection of little essays or little vignettes. The inner flap says that Ginzburg takes familiar objects and experiences, worn out shoes, money boxes, meatballs, childhood, silence, and transforms them into subjects of great significance. I think it's okay that I don't know much about her because I've skimmed this introduction, which was written by Rachel Cusk, and she says that no context is required to read her being Ginzburg. In fact, to read her is to realize how burdened literature frequently is by its own social and material milieu. Yet, her work is not abstract or overtly philosophical. It is deeply practical and personal. You come away from it feeling that you know the author profoundly without having very much idea of who she is. So, I think I can approach this knowing as little as I do and have a wonderful time reading it. So, looking forward to it. If you've read Natalia Ginzburg, let me know what you think. If you've read any of these books, or have been influenced and excited by any of the books or writers I've spoken about, let me know as well. And if you liked this video, please leave me a like, subscribe if you've enjoyed hanging out and want some more from me. Enjoy the rest of your summer reading. Read some women in translation, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.